It is a fantastic one to play with, and as a reminder, it does go all the way to point E, so a lot of work to be done on this map, but be ready for B1, B2. We're going to have Senevas everywhere.
Ooh, trench lines. This is going to be fun. It's one of my personal favorite maps without question. And Korea played trench lines yesterday in their matchup against Thailand. So we know a little bit about Korea's game plan going into this one. The question is, do we know about Japan? And, well, no, we don't, but because they played against China early on yesterday on Cracked, so it's going to be fun to see them here. But one thing about Korea, remember on their attacking side, they ended Goj on B1 and B2. That's where they were held. So basically, any point past that, if Japan doesn't shut them down on B1 and B2, is unknown territory. It's going to be wonderful to see how well they play that there. And from Korea's side, also their defense was relatively quick. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Thailand got through their defense pretty seamlessly. I want to say, especially from like point C onwards, Thailand only lost like 40-something lives. So today, a big moment to step up and shine, and we get to see a direct effort from Korea. Obviously, the improvements that they're making, and, well, let's see the game plan when it comes to Japan after all, putting a lot of emphasis on the southern portion of the map.
Yeah, and as a reminder, if you haven't played trench lines in a while, or maybe you've just been watching, you're kind of starting in the bottom right-hand corner of this map, and you make a big semicircle clockwise around the map, ending in that building at the top. That's going to be your point E. The biggest things we know about trench lines is that, one, A is just about, if you can, depleting some of the lives. It usually goes pretty quick to the attackers. B1 and B2 are your first big hold, and the best thing you can do as a defense, the way you win this game early, Taylor, to be honest, is if you can take care of the attacker's tank fast enough. It's very difficult to do. These teams are very well organized and are going to keep it way back at the beginning of B1 and B2, and only get aggressive if we have to go for the take on B1 and B2. Once you get through B1, B2, point C usually goes within, I mean, maybe 60 seconds. I've never seen a team hold point C for longer than maybe a minute or two. It's quite easy to take from the attacker side, and so then they push back, and it then goes to D1, D2, which are usually a little bit more difficult, and they're all about depleting of lives so that when you get to point E, the attackers don't have the advantage, because point E is probably the hardest point to take if you don't have a crazy amount of guided missiles and you don't have a crazy amount of lives. The attackers usually need near max to make sure they can secure that unless they have some heroic plays. So that's the basic breakdown of the map. It's a really fun one. It's one of my favorites. I know the community loves it as well, and of course a lot of points to get through, so let's see what these teams were able to do. And it's fun to watch them talk about their strategies, because it looks like both teams are very focused on B1 and B2. But Taylor, Korea versus Japan, and I believe, if I saw that correctly, Korea is going to be starting on the attack. Let's see what they're able to do.
Yeah, Korea on the attack. This time they returned the trench lines, but with a different opponent, opposite of Japan. And let's put it into perspective. We talked about it earlier, but now that we're officially getting into this matchup, it is a best of 3. They will be switching sides, attack, defense, defense, attack. But this is a $10,000 match. What do I mean by that? Well, 4th place walks away with $10,000, but if you win this series, whether it's Japan or Korea, you now are guaranteed 3rd place, which means $20,000. That's a lot of money to split amongst your teammates. That means the stakes are high, and we're going to see the best come out from both sides. Now, you mentioned tanks. We already see one coming out from the side of Korea, which is great news. One of the things Japan and Korea did not execute well yesterday against their respective opponents was taking and countering the tanks. The tanks were truly devastating and detrimental. This time around, Japan and Korea, coming into day 2, have to absolutely challenge those tanks if they want a chance to win.
Yeah, and again, I will say Korea's doing a fantastic job of making sure their tank just throws down some covering fire. I mean, look at that. They're picking up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different kills just by throwing shells down range and making sure they stay out of the fight. This is exactly what you want to do to just open up a window of opportunity for your team. It did look like Japan was able to hold off the first initial onslaught, but this one wide open because of the tank. I can only expect to see Korea taking the point off of this push if they can push out a couple of these Seneva operators that are actually on the point. We told you everybody's got to roll, and in trench lines, we're going to have a lot of Seneva operators, and guess what? They are OBJ fiends. They're going to be sitting right on the point and just slamming people with the shield. Whether they can see or not, it doesn't matter. It's a body on the point, and that's all that matters.
Oh, we're even taking out the ATV2 up close. All right, nice stuff, or AT4, excuse me. Good stuff coming out from Japan to push Korea back. Korea had a ton of real estate within the first point, and I thought for sure A might be captured relatively quickly, but Japan had a different plan. The Saniv was truly instrumental in obviously pushing them back. But Japan will, or excuse me, Korea will have another chance once they are able to spawn back up and get back in there. But it was a bloodbath off the rip. We will be paying attention top left, by the way. They start with 200 lives. We're already down to 177 at the moment, and a large reason for that obviously has to be the Sanivas and Japan's pressure on the defensive side of things. But Korea's still making a good effort, and I think A might be captured relatively soon.
Yeah, and that's Delta in the tank just opening up the map. And again, A is a very difficult point to hold. I actually think that Japan would have held this quite well if the tank wasn't constantly shelling and getting a ton of value from it as well. They had a ton of bodies on the point, but because they were so grouped up, whether it was Saniva operators or otherwise, the tank was able to pick up. Look how many kills they've got. Delta, they're already 13 kills to start this thing off. That is the main reason that they are on that point and already moving on to B1 and B2 quite quickly. You can see we've already got a couple people going for revives, but they were more focused on getting those kills early, and already 25 between the top two Slayers, which is going to be that team. So I'm really pumped to watch that squad. Watch out for Delta. He's going to be the guy to watch in the tank. We'll see if he's able to keep it alive. And as we push over, let's listen into Korea.
넘어갔어. 풀소리. 좀만 뒤로 뺄게. 풀소리. 거점 우측 들어갑니다. 우측에 엔지 많아요. 들어가지 마. 뿅 들어가지 마. 주방 정리. 안에 다 맞았어. 들어가. 들어가래. 뿅 들어가지 말라니까. 대기. 들어가지 말고. 땀 먹어라. 일단 주변만 들어가야 돼요. 주변만 들어와.
Korea comms sound great. Obviously, we don't have all the translation, but the namely big things I was seeing was a well-coordinated push over to B1 to go ahead and get aggressive on this point. The second thing I saw, I had some people in chat talking about, well, the vehicles aren't that hard to kill. They are when there's a full squad of engineers behind that tank. You saw that tank get to about 10% health, but because they had 4 engineers right behind it, constantly healing it, it was able to stay alive. That is a huge clutch from the side of Korea to keep their tank on the board and still pepper these people. And I think Japan knows that they're still trying to send a couple routemen on the far side to take out this tank, but it is a tall task. You gotta focus a lot of troops, and that could also spell disaster when it comes to capture points.
First wave of attack for Korea has fallen. Japan successfully pushes them back despite the pressure from the tank, despite the pressure from the manpower on foot. It was Japan who was able to successfully defend B1 and get it fully capped for themselves. You can see the engineers desperately trying to get this tank back up to full operation. It got down to about a 4th health, and that was some good effort of Japan, but they get it back in, and now we're attacking the right-hand side, and you can see the pressure from Korea through the trench lines, and Japan is off in the distance, and it looks as if we might be making an attempt for B2 this time around.
Oh, this is so sick. This is coordinated warfare. This is so clean. Look how many players are moving together as a unit all together. Even if they lose 1, 2, 3, 4, it doesn't matter because they have a massive numbers advantage to swing on to B2. The tug-of-war is about to get started, if not already here, as we are aggressively taking B2. And it seems like Japan is reeling from this counterattack, trying to figure out, what do we do? Can we even swing on this, or do we risk losing both if we do? Let's hold down B1 and then reassess and try to start the tug-of-war and keep it going. Never stop. Can't let them take both.
Big fan of Korea already making an audible play going towards B2. They did so. Japan was a bit blindsided during that push throughout the trench lines. You could tell Japan, they were still focused on the B1 attack because Korea was so focused and so quick to getting over to B2. They overwhelmed the position and they successfully captured it. Granted, Japan still putting in wonderful effort to push them back and ultimately get the decap, which is what they did on B1. But the question is, will B1 be able to be captured? Obviously, that's the goal right before you move on to point C. But I'm liking what Korea's doing. They're playing a lot better today than we witnessed yesterday. But now let's listen into Japan and hear what they have to say.
오케이 오케이 오케이.顔だけチェックしに行こう。顔だけチェックしに行こう。うちの分隊。オッケー、囲いかまするよ。キラー分隊。後ろから行けよ、ビアン。ちょっと俺前目で見に行ってくるね。ここここここここここここピンとこピンとこ。これ前に行った。ビアン手前いる、ビアン手前いる、ビアン手前いる。オッケー、大丈夫大丈夫。オッケー、カバ大丈夫。脇なす脇なす脇なす。
B1 の枚数足りてない B1 の枚数足りてない
B1 の枚数足りない了解。B1 残ってるシーン行っていいよ。
B1 残ってる
うちの分隊ちょっと行くぞ。うちの分隊うちの分隊いい。今立つだけで立つだけで立つだけで。スキャンでいるとこスキャン321。
いや最悪
オッケー。今キラメタ攻めてちょっとキラメタ戻るキラメタ戻る。Okay,
and much like Korea, Japan, full force when it comes to the comms, sounding great. And you can see, I mean, obviously you can hear the effort they're putting in. I mean, they managed to lose B2, they gained B2 back. They lost B1 originally, they gained B1 back. Obviously, B1 is being captured by Korea, but both teams back and forth, tug of war like you always say, Goj, but it looks like Korea is starting to make a good effort to capturing both points. The question is, can Japan answer back once again?
Yeah, this is a pretty key moment because they've got the momentum on B1. They're trying to swing all of it, or namely most of it, all the way over to B2 and capture both of these at the same time. If they just trade points here, they're not going to get the win. And because of that, the tank is getting involved. What do you do when you have a numbers disadvantage? You bring in the firepower, baby. A risky move, but if this works out for them, they will cap both. And this is the best call from Dead Dog I think I've seen today. This tank is catching a ton of flack, and it goes down. We've lost the first tank early. It was a risky move. I love the call from Dead Dog because this was their opportunity to take B1, B2. The problem is the risky move, it didn't pay off. Japan, an unbelievable effort to make sure they had people up on that hill overlooking B1. They were able to take down the tank. This is a massive swing to the side of Japan. If they don't lose both points here, I think Japan could win it on B1 and B2. No tank means a huge boon for the defense.
Yeah, I agree with you. We do see, obviously, a tank coming into the other side, and I believe there is going to be a recovery. Maybe they were confident in moving the tank forward to B1 because they knew there was going to be another one in the back lines. Good recovery. Wow. B1 and B2 will be captured, and we're back up to 200 lives. And great effort from Japan. They pushed Korea off of B1 and B2 respectively as long as they possibly could, but Korea was relentless in their attack and, well, obviously represented in the stats. A new guy up at the top, at least in my eyes, 95k Wansa, with a total of 20 eliminations, tearing it up, and the leader, at least, behind that of Delta at 23. And stats relatively even on both ends, but the reality is Korea looking very strong. I don't know if Japan has what it takes to stop Korea all the way through, but I do know C. Well, C is obviously going to be relatively easy to capture. Korea should move through this quite easily. Let's listen in.
나키도 들었어? 지구면 타. 건물까지 붙었습니다. 콜 주시면 더 들어갈게요.
들른다. 왼쪽 라인에 적 한 분도 있대요. 우리가 필요 없다. 앞에 건물에도 있어. 돼.
그러면 우측 건물에 박태면.
안원님 살려봐요. 안원님.
연막 뿌려놨어.
천천히.
사료만 먹었어. 진입하겠습니다. 하나 밀었고.
일반 안 되지. 우리 본대 집중. 올 필요 없어. 본대 집중. 피어리스트 본대 집중해. 왼쪽에 크게 돌아가는 분도 있거든요. 이거 무시할게요. 저희 가운데로 밀어. 가운데로.
이거 우리 왼쪽으로 가자. 우리 왼쪽으로 밀어.
오른쪽. 가운데 밀고 오른쪽 약해요.
오른쪽으로 밀어. 빵킹에 저기 있어. 2층 조심하세요.
Well, great comms from Korea, but a better hold from Japan, frankly, on a point that's very difficult to hold. They're doing a pretty good job. Here's the very interesting thing. I was looking at some stats on that last line and pulling up that leaderboard, Taylor. The interesting part, it was a really good call from Korea to send that first tank in, which we now know is because they had enough score to call in another one. That was the crazy part. At the top was our tank user at 15,000 score. An M1A4 battle tank is 12,000 points the first time you call it in. So a great call to communicate back to the squad leader, Dead Dog, saying, hey, I'm going in, I'm making sure we secure these points and move on to new. Now, we're spending a lot of our points fairly early, but absolutely worth it on B1 and B2, which is one of the harder points to attack. And so you're able to see not only the M1 called in, but I believe also a Lav called in, which is around 8,000. And so watch out for some of those. Maybe the tank destroyer. If not, I'll get a better look at it here in a second. But that would be a 10,000 score, which would come from Wonka, who you shouted out. So watch out for those two gentlemen who have been tearing it up in the vehicles.
Yeah, and Korea, again, played trench lines against Thailand yesterday. They lost on B1 and B2. It's great to see them making wonderful adjustments and big play calls, specifically from Dead Dog's perspective. The commander for the side of Korea to take B1, B2 pretty much without any loss. I mean, again, leaving with 200 lives, already big improvements being made. That full day or that full break that they had between day 1 and day 2 being utilized very, very well. Got a nice fight between Japan and Korea on point C. Up close and personal, as you would expect, right? These big CQC fights to try and capture the C objective. And teams are starting to get a bit loose and get a bit squirrely, getting these off angles. And Korea is the main offender for that, as they're trying to take Japan down methodically. But I will say, it looks like Korea is starting to make some good work on to C with a couple of individuals, but not before Japan shuts them right down.
Yeah, and again, I think this is a pretty solid hold. You got to remember that, yeah, the lives aren't ticking down quite as fast as they usually do in pubs that you all probably play and I play, because we've got so many fantastic stingers that are constantly reviving people to make sure they save tickets on the attacking side. So although it looks like a really strong hold from Japan on C, one misstep and all of a sudden Korea's not only taking this point but also going to be moving into points D1 and D2 with maximum amount of lives. Like, you're gonna gain somewhere around like 80 or so from this point, if I remember correctly. And so as such, if you get them below 120, that's job well done. So watch out for that metric in top middle. They're at 168 right now. Still gonna laud Japan for the defense on C, one of the hardest points to hold on this map. Doing a great job thus far, but a lot more to be done still on this point.
That's how we get onto a Korean perspective. They seem to fall. Japan has wonderful firepower and a good defense onto the hillside. Korea, I believe, was making headway on this hillside here just to the south, as you see on screen, but Japan successfully countered them and shut them down. Let's listen into Japan and what they have to say.
C 入れるか C の分隊他の分隊準備して C 中入ってきて C 中
キラ分隊行くキラ分隊行く
行くよ行くよ C 中入るよ
あいよあいよあいよ俺た行く
ナイスナイスナイスナイス
こっちのポイントまだいるポイントまだいる
C 中入るよ C 中入るよ
ポイントうちの分隊も
AP タンクするかそう AP タンク
オッケーオッケーオッケーオッケーオッケー分け直しね僕
いやまだいる人数いる
Well, you can tell Japan, they started getting heated. They got fired up. And the reason why is Korea was able to successfully have capture C. Japan needed to get active. That's why the comms were so hectic. But then it also started slowing down towards the very end. And I think that means, well, they realized C might be on its way to being captured. They need to now focus on the next objective.
Okay, kid, it's not quite over, but likely is. Do you see what happened there? Not only is this building getting obliterated, by the way, which is a huge boon, frankly, for the attackers, because the defense can't set up inside of it. Japan somehow is holding on to this point because they finally killed the strategic respawn beacon that was placed inside of it. I don't know if you all saw it. I think it was right before the listen-in. It's a strategic recon beacon place. That's one of the things you can call in. The entire team was spawning inside of that building. There was people just appearing out of nowhere and able to tick down that point like crazy. They almost were able to take it, but somehow Japan has opened things back up and taken back this point, at least for now. The problem is, there isn't a lot of cover on this point anymore. It's that building's pretty much gone. So good luck to either team standing on the point. It's going to come down to raw numbers, and I think the attack's going to have an advantage. But I am impressed thus far, and here is a look at another beacon close by that the other players can spawn into. So this is why they're kind of stacking in that far side building, which is going to give them a massive advantage getting into this one. I think Japan knows it, trying to take down that building, but it's just a numbers game at this point, and slowly but surely dwindling. But again, again, our metric for success in my mind is 120, and they're just about there. The longer they can hold on past 120, the better they're going to be going into points D1 and D2.
Yeah, I was going to say, they've lost, Korea, at least from their perspective, have lost more lives on point C than they lost on B1 and B2. And that shows great resiliency from Decided Japan on a point that typically is relatively easy to capture very quickly. You said less than 60 seconds. I fully agree. Japan's put up an incredible fight, and I've managed to take down the lives of Korea, who now seem to finally be locking in point Charlie. Japan now has to focus their attention on the next point. The question is, how many lives are going to be up there? So 165, honestly, that's not bad from Japan's perspective.
Yeah, it looks like they were only given around 45, 50 or so. I want to say it was 50. I think they got them down to 115, which is great. So this is actually pretty solid for Japan. You've at least depleted 35 of the overall max that you could bring into D1, D2. The problem is they got to do it again on D1 and D2 to make sure that Korea goes into point E with less than 100 lives. That's going to be the metric for success in my mind. E is a lot easier to hold than these two. I'll be curious what they're able to do given the amount of score that's being racked up. And that's what the other thing that I'm excited to see is. I was very impressed with Korea. They were able to call in. The commanders have orders that they can give their team, and they were able to mark C as an order to take about 3 seconds before the team took it, which not only assures them a ton of score, but is a surefire way to get a ton of score for your team, to be able to call in more vehicles. And that's the name of the game for the Korea squad. How many vehicles can we get on the map, and how can we use them effectively and keep them alive? So well executed from the commander. Shout out to both of our commanders from Korea and Japan, doing a great job thus far, but truly a key factor in the success of their team.
Yeah, Korea currently has 4 vehicles on the map. I believe one is nearly about to be destroyed. Yeah, it's going to be the one just in front of you with the 4th health, and trying to take cover as much as possible just to get a little bit of health back so they can obviously pursue onto D1, which is exactly where Korea is going to be heading to first. They put an emphasis on both points, especially trying to take over the left side hill, and now D1 is going to be touched and at least going to be contested. Japan has a couple of Senivas on this point, but not going to be able to do much at the moment. There is a Seniva finally going into the attack. Winter starts freaking out. I'd be right with them. Never a good prospect to see a Seniva encroaching on your territory, but with one vehicle gone, Korea's defense, or excuse me, attacks, starts to struggle a bit, but D1 regardless is getting captured. Look at how many red dots you see over there from Korea's side. That's going to be the attackers making great headway on the first point.
Yeah, assault vehicles are decent. The biggest thing they're able to do is transport a decent amount of players. We saw that in the Threshold map, pushing like 7 players, 6 players into B2, which was really fun as basically a transport vehicle. But the Tank Destroyer has been the unsung hero of most of these points, just going in and cleaning up. And that Tank Destroyer, by the way, that's Wonka. Wonka called this in after point A into point B, got 10,000 score, and that was the reason they were able to call in not only that, but also the second battle tank, which was on the side of that Delta player. So watch out for both of those guys. They still got the tank on the far left-hand side of your screen and the Tank Destroyer, both just peppering and harrying so that the team was able to take D1. And it actually looks like they've got 2 M1 tanks and the Tank Destroyer, so they are feeling very comfortable right now on D1, just stabilizing for their team, creating and amassing a force before they swing over to D2.
Protecting those tanks for the final hurrah, the final push onto E, is going to be critical. That's why I think they're kind of playing it a bit more passive, staying in the back lines, not wanting to expose themselves to potentially damage with the AT4s or whatever other way Japan decides to go for the attack. D1 successfully captured D2. Now, how do we go about this? There's still a lot of attention placed on D1 as Japan is going for the retake, and I think for Korea's perspective, they want to try and wipe out as many players as they possibly can on the D1 side so then they can focus on to D2. Japan, when did they pull off of D1 and focus on D2 for the defense?
Yeah, it's a tough conversation. Again, we talk about Tug-of-war, but this is more of a standoff. We've got Korea full lockdown on this point, making sure nobody can touch it. They want to fully stabilize and create a force that can swing over, and it's just a matter of when. I think that's a great point, and we'll continue to watch out for it. Let's listen into Korea, hear what they've got to say.
네. 어디 가는 것 같아요, 지금? 저? 저
이거
어디
우측으로
가나요?
조심하세요. 우측으로. 우측 조심하세요.
그냥 중앙 동산으로 올려주세요. 중앙으로 여러분 중앙으로.
예, 중앙 언덕, 중앙 언덕.
다시 뽑아볼게요.
오른쪽 T1 오른쪽에 한 군데밖에 없고 D2 쪽에 한 군데, 중앙에 두 군데예요. 중앙부터 밀어야 돼요.
예,
T1은
제가 다시 뽑을 테니까 탱크 어그로 빼줄 수 있어요?
여러분 저희 거점에 이거 말로 해줘. 말로.
네, 소환할게요.
아직 잠시만요.
이거
지금
능선으로.
Copy. Vehicle drop to designated location.
좌측 능선에 한 파티.
리그로 해야 돼요. 리그로.
병원에서 소환했어요.
리그로 팝시다. T1 뒤쪽으로.
우리 이거 리그룹 해야 돼.
왼쪽 능선에 두 군데입니다. 이거 그냥
Well, Korea almost loses another tank, but they're able to get it onto the map here for just a moment. Look how low it is. It gets a little too aggressive after getting shot out of the air. This is classic strategies when teams call in vehicles. Oftentimes the opponent team, if they can, throw down some either AT-4 Stingers or otherwise any sort of weapon that they can rip into these vehicles before they land, and oftentimes you'll see these vehicles killed before they can even land. And so because of that, you've got to call it pretty far away and then drive it up. Korea almost loses a third tank, but this firepower they're bringing in right now should open up these points here shortly, and I think Japan knows it. I would assume some of our comms there, we're making sure we're targeting vehicles, but also swapping to operators that can blow these vehicles up, because we've got Wolf in a tank now, and it looks like finally shooting back from the side of Japan, trying to get a little bit of a look at this tank and potentially take it out. It's going to have to retreat. That's the name of the game. Go in, get out. You saw it from the tank destroyer. You'll see it from the M1 battle tanks.
Doge, I want to give credit where credit is due to Japan. I mean, what a wonderful job attacking D1. They lose it for a little bit, and I ask the question, when do you back off of this and focus your defensive positions on D2, the second position that, or the second point, excuse me, that Korea needs to capture? Well, Japan gave me the answer. It was like, hey, we're not pulling back. We're not retreating. We're not going to surrender D1 that easily. Yes, they got it momentarily, but we believe in ourselves to be able to retake that point. And they did it. And not only did they do it, but they've taken significant amount of lives away from Korea's side of things and put a lot of damage onto the tanks and vehicles that Korea is using. The second attack and the second attempt from Korea's perspective onto D1 is now underway. They will effectively get it decapped, plus they're going to go for the full cap itself, and maybe this time, like you said, with the vehicles and the tanks help, it's going to be a bit more effective. From Japan's side, though, a tank way off in the distance. Man, I hope he can snipe well with the rockets, but it looks like he's getting sniped himself, brother, and that tank is gone.
No. Oh, strategic misstep there. I like Japan needed to save that tank for point E in case they needed it, or a last-ditch effort to hold down the points on low lives here on D1, D2. And just an off angle, they thought they had enough cover. They throw the smokes up and not enough engineers. It's the same conversation we had before. The problem is when your tank has to be that far away and peppering from a distance, you don't have enough engineers to take alive, to keep it alive. And the other thing is, when you look at the Korea squad, they had 3 tanks. They had so much firepower, you weren't going to get away. You weren't going to stay alive with only 1 engineer on the tank trying to keep it up. So great job by Korea to reduce some of the firepower from the Japan side. And we'll be excited to see who's going to be able to win this one. It ain't gonna be the tank destroyer. This lob is looking fierce and is able to take down not only the tank destroyer but also stay up pretty easily with the bodies they have on it.
Even despite with the love, D2 starting to get decapped. Korea making great effort on D1 and D2. If they can capture these very quickly, or at least within the next couple of minutes or even minute, Korea's going to go into the final point with a relatively healthy amount of lives, and therefore is going to be well on their way to winning their attacking side and leading 1-0 in this series. Again, just to reiterate, this is a $10,000 matchup. Whoever loses this, they'll walk away with $10,000, but whoever wins just increase their prize pool by $10,000. Let's listen in with Japan.
2만 럭 사야 된단 말이야. 야, 히디. 자, 히디.
Zone to the critical objective.
目の前って足りねえな。ごめん、ボックス、お前、先、あれ、
High level threat has been flagged. Take it out.
Well, during that listening, you see that Korea able to finally capture the 2 points. We now go into the final round of action. Can Korea close out their attacking side with the win? We look at some of the stats, and Summer has taken over Wonka's spots, the top eliminator, with 35. But Korea is waking up. They're looking good. And Goj, let's bring it back. You mentioned Japan losing their tank during that long-range fight between tank-on-tank action. How much is that going to hurt them going into the final point?
I think it'll hurt them some. Obviously, they've racked up enough score. We were able to see a couple of those score lines to be able to call in a couple more vehicles here, and it does look like they've got Sakudi on a tank right now in the kill feed, looking to take down some threats. We've got Widow on a flank here, potentially. I don't know what you're going to do as a solo, but maybe could snipe out the opponents. One lone survivor, one lone sniper, weeding out a couple of the folks that are pushing in. I would love to see Widow go crazy in the kill feed, but overall, I think not going to have a lot of value. But yeah, I think you're going to see some good score come through from the Japan side, enough to be able to call in a couple more tanks. They're just outnumbered from a firepower standpoint, and so some of these pushes are going to be critical to see how it works out for them. It looks like they've got Alav still alive, and then you've got the Japan tank on the far side. Namely, look, I don't speak Japanese. I will say the repeating phrase that I heard towards the end as the point was being captured, it sounded like to me, get out of there, go next, essentially, because that Lav was staying a hair too long, and I think the command was saying, get out and keep it alive. It's going to be critical for the hold.
There's one thing I admire about you, your linguistic ability to listen in to multiple languages and decipher what they're saying. It genuinely amazes me. You're just one smart cookie. That's just the way it goes. But I think you're right. E already getting a little bit decapped, but don't worry. Japan, they've still got a good foothold on it. They've got a lot of great action. Dead Dog finally back on your screen. The commander with such a dedicated face coming into today's competition. You can tell the loss yesterday hurt him a lot. He wanted to come in now for the Korea side of things as the commander and obviously go big, and he's doing that today. He really is. And you noticed he also took a bit of a back seat from the slaying category, and I think he's playing a bit of a different role and trying to get a good idea of the landscape for obviously his team and his community. Korea holding on tight to what they got on the E. They're slowly closing that vice grip. Japan, though, doing a great job trying to keep them at bay, especially with this high ground. Savo up top of the tower is laying down a lot of fire. He'll finally drop down to assist his team on the ground.
And it looks like Widow was able to call in a vehicle, able to keep it alive. So therefore, we've got another vehicle on the map there for Japan. Likely Korea is going to be able to call in a couple more. But I like this Japan play. Put us an Eva up on high. Just making sure that if you come up here and join me, you're going to have a problem with the razor wire. Some tactical mines, but down below, the chaos continuing to ensue. And right now, Korea is just looking for a window of opportunity, right? The door is very closed from Japan. They've got bodies on the point. They've got multiple vehicles. They've got a couple people on high, now getting cut down. But the window of opportunity is coming because Korea is finding chinks in the armor. They're finding an entry point, and this is oftentimes where you see attacking teams find some footholds. And it looks like our tank destroyer that was just called in from the side of Japan gets obliterated immediately. Guess who's on the other side? It's one of our top fraggers on the game and on the day. That's Wonka going crazy in the tanks, keeping things alive for the attackers, and they're able to find that foothold in those units, those power units on the right-hand side. That's where most of the attacking forces tend to push through, but ideally they're able to pressure this building, and then they'll have a ton of footing and potentially take this point.
This is where things start to get serious for Japan's perspective on the defensive side. Korea has moved in with 2 tanks, and they are taking a lot of real estate on E. In fact, they're starting to get the full decap and will start capping themselves relatively soon. I think Japan's in a lot of trouble, and they need to get to work very, very quickly. I did see a take on the Japan side, but it was off in the distance, and it hasn't done much, quite truthfully. Korea moving in very quickly. AT-4s from up top, but how many can you shoot? How many can you get? You need to take it down. You need one more shot. He's going to go ahead and full send. It doesn't get the blow up. I don't think so. And E is quickly getting captured. Is this the beginning of the end of game 1?
Well, the beginning of something as a guided missile comes flying onto the point, and it does look like Korea has found just one single target from what I can tell as Japan begins to clean up with vehicles on point. They tried to zone a couple people off, ideally Ideally, they would have hit one of these vehicles if they could, but instead, Japan was able to get onto the point, clear people off, in what looked like a critical moment for Korea to win this thing. Japan does a great job of resurfacing with their vehicles on point, saving the day. And that's the thing with the guided missiles. They are very good, but you've got to use them effectively to see true value from them. You can see Japan is getting on the aggressive. Look at this push all the way on the backside to take down a Korea vehicle. So well executed to take 2 of their vehicles off point when they had the point fully captured. They could afford it, swinging down on an unguarded tank. Easy cleanup and a great effort. Here's the problem. We got more guided missiles incoming, and if this is well placed, this could open things back up for Korea if it is a Korea missile. Here we go.
Here it comes.
Bang, and another Korea missile only finds 1, but will open up those power supply units on the far right-hand side, or now left side of your screen, for the Korea entry point. They've got an entry point onto the point. Question is, if they can start getting this cap, what will Japan do?
A lot of manpower from Korea now pushing on to E once again. Japan did a wonderful job pushing them back, but Korea quick to recover. Very quick indeed, and well, from Japan's side, they're holding on tight to what they got. The question is, can they continue to do so? 98 lives remaining for Korea.
I'm going to be honest, I was kind of critical of some of these. Oh my gosh. Well, the best guided missile of the day actually comes from Japan. It looks like our Korea members were all grouped up as expected on that left side, now mid side of our screen behind this windmill. And, well, guided missile took them all out. Going to open things up a little bit, continue to maintain some breathing room. They got to hold on for 89 more lives. Well placed from Japan.
I do see a Japan vehicle finds an entryway on the back end. It's going to be able to full force themselves into the backside of Korea. Now they've got them pincered. They've got them in their line of sights, and now they are mowing Korea down. Wonderful job. Korea was so focused on pushing forward onto E, as they should be, that they left their backside exposed, and it had or at least it allowed an opportunity for Japan to push through and, well, encircle them and ultimately take them down. Every time it looks like Korea is making a good effort, is making headway onto E, Japan shuts them down. But do we have tower control? Yes, we do. Korea has managed to overtake it from Japan, who was up there for the longest time.
Well, the sirens are ringing, which means another missile incoming. It doesn't look like most folks are grouped in one particular area. Most people have backed up from the Korea side. Look how far they're backing up from the point, knowing this isn't going to hit, feel comfortable about it. Not a single kill going their way. Well executed from Korea to make sure they stay alive and then readdress this point. But it is the story of Japan right now, and it's the story of this lab driver. My goodness. Constantly finding so much value in the backline while also not losing hardly an iota of health. A perfect execution, the perfect wheelman. Very well done. And I was going to say, I really was pretty critical of the people that were playing on high. It didn't seem like they were doing all that much. The difference maker actually is using the AT-4s and rocket launchers from on high rather than most of your weapons. And it looks like Korea is just trying to hold this position so they would stop doing that. It caused so much trouble, and now it looks like the tank maybe is looking back up, but continuing to rain down hellfire on this tank. Korea has taken over the windmill, thrown AT-4 bullets down range. Let's try to blow up this tank the best we can. I like the counterplay here, and I think this is a beautiful execution to get up on top of these barricades so that the tank can throw shells up there. What a cool look. I love it.
Yeah, the tank warfare has just been so cool to watch, whether it's scaling buildings or here on top of the barricade to angle your way to attack the players up top from Korea is just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Like I said, I have seen some of the best warfare ever over these past 2 days. And now 55 lives. Things are starting to get serious for Korea. Japan is actually doing this against all odds.
And another guided missile, likely from the side of Japan, lands near that power supply, thinking this is where Korea's pulling their forces. But Korea is basically nowhere to be found. They're so scattered, they're so unorganized at this point, and it's because of not only the vehicles playing flank, the guided missiles forcing them off the zone, but also just the Japan tanks. They had less vehicles on the map, but made better use of them on counterattack plays. And because of that, it looks like Korea's lost all of their vehicles. And now the vehicle advantage, the man advantage, the zone advantage, all on the side of Japan. Look how far they've pushed back this wall. The Iron Curtain is closed, and there's no way that Korea is going to be able to get through this, not for a while. And the problem is they are running out of runway 38, 37 lives remaining, and Japan is utterly smacking this team around. Let's listen in with Korea and figure out what they can do.
우측 힘.
오른쪽에 차량 와요. 오른쪽에 차량 와.
집중해야 돼. 왼쪽에 창고로 들어갈 수 있는 사람?
뒤에 한 분 비코 깔아줄 수 있어요? 숨어서? 아 죽었구나.
이거 돌차 뽑아볼게. 돌차 뽑아볼게. 티켓 아껴. 돌차 뽑아볼게. 여러분 이거 리그룹을 진짜 한 번밖에 기회 없거든.
I think that listening is signaling the end of this game. Korea, so high energy, high pacing when it came to their comms earlier, when they were dominating, when they were pushing forward, taking the fight to Japan. But now it's a bit more somber as Japan is pushing back Korea. This is the furthest we've seen Japan pushed up on point E, and it's only going to continue to become more severe, especially because they're taking down the Korean respawn beacons, which now have been pushed all the way back. You know, Korea put up a wonderful effort. They made great headway onto E, but Japan, as you pointed out, when it came to their vehicle usage, they utilized them better despite them having less. The way that they were able to get onto the backside of Korea once they were fully pushed up onto E and then close that vice grip, as I've been saying, it put Korea in the blender. They just struggled to recover. Now down to 16 lives. Now, I will say this, China only had 8, and they were able to win their map, okay? So there is a slight chance in Korea. You can see it on your screen. Here's the last-ditch effort.
Yeah, this is the last swing. It is well organized. They were able to make it around the final defense, the wall of Japan players. But they not only have to get into this building, they've got to take control of the building, and they've got to put a tactical respawn beacon in there. And I'm going to be honest, they're getting obliterated by Sakuti. This Sakuti is changing the game for Japan in that tank. It's not even close because the tank is shelling this building with a couple guided missiles potentially coming in from either side. It could change things, but it's got to change things right now. 13 lives, and Japan is on a tear. Korea still can't find footing, and the missile lands, and it cleans up the final couple Korean players on the point. This one's not even close. So well executed on point E from Japan. They are your top team in this matchup, at least on this point. Very well done.
Very, very well done. And an evenly based matchup coming down to the final point. It was back and forth at any one moment. You know, you could have said, okay, Korea's going to win this, you know, especially at critical moments. Like, I thought for sure they were going to win. They went into the final point with 160 lives. Still relatively healthy, but I wasn't expecting Japan to be as dominant as they were with their vehicles. Well done. That's got to feel so good. Japan getting their first win of the tournament.
Yeah, I think it feels amazing, and honestly, like, very well commanded, well executed, great comms seemingly from the team. And what I was really impressed with was also their saving of their score till the end. It's one of the things I shouted out at the top of that map, right? We were looking at what our Korean team was able to do to push forward the equation and take down their opponents. One of the things they did was they sacrificed a couple vehicles early and then called in new ones in order to secure the point. I don't hate the idea, and frankly, they probably needed to do that. The problem with it is when we got to point E, there was just more score to go around for the side of our Japan defense. They had more things that they could call in, and when they did have that vehicle disadvantage at the very beginning, they had two really good strategies that worked. One, they found an opening on a tank on the back line that was not defended. They sent 2 vehicles to take it down. 2 of their only vehicles on the map, by the way. It was a risky move, but it